Patrick Breeding is an entrepreneur and recent graduate from the University of Maine who got his start in entrepreneurship through building his first startup, which created medical education tools for remote training of doctors and nurses. During this time, he was in a master's program in biomedical engineering, building homemade optical systems and exploring pharmaceutical applications of lobster processing byproducts. While growing his entrepreneurship skill set with this company and engineering toolbox going through his master's, he experienced a very pressurized range of personal and professional trials and tribulations that come with building a company, which led him to consider what is truly important, what truly drives him, and what path he was going to take to maximize his impact on the world, which is creating products and services that change people's quality of life. He is passionate about biotechnology research and commercialization in various fields, spanning drug development, skincare, marine bioresources, materials science, medical education, and sports performance innovation. Patrick has now co-founded multiple companies in the biotechnology space. One of these is Kenotech, an innovative sports performance startup using motion capture and virtual reality to visualize, analyze, and communicate biomechanical information to decrease risk of musculoskeletal injuries for athletes and the general population. He also serves as a board member of the Bioscience Association of Maine and enjoys leading regular K through 12 outreach experiences, motivating and mentoring students for careers in STEM. Now he spends the majority of his time building a skincare company that uses the serum protein from lobsters as the active ingredient in skincare products for people suffering from eczema. And apart from being quite brilliant, he is also very nice and caring and compassionate. I met him at a Maine Biz event. And Patrick Breeding is a young man who should be held up for others as a role model of what it means to be an entrepreneur, a student of life, and just a really great guy. Welcome to the PR Maven podcast, a podcast all about growing your network and building your brand through traditional and digital networking techniques. I'm Nancy Marshall, the PR Maven and CEO of Marshall Communications. I've been strengthening brands through PR for over 35 years, and now I'm celebrating the success of executives, influencers, business owners, and entrepreneurs from all around the world, all of whom have cultivated their brands and broadened their networks through traditional and digital networking methods. Each week, I interview one of these interesting and influential individuals and provide an opportunity for you, the PR Maven Nation, to gain insights from their strategies and stories. So stay tuned for this week's episode, and thanks for listening. So Patrick, I'm so happy to be sitting here with you today at the Portland Pod. It's just awesome. How long ago did we meet?
We met after startup. We met at a Maine Biz event.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Where I got up and did what I do for my own PR now is like, hi, I have a question. First of all, my name is Patrick and we use lobster blood to treat eczema and we're making skincare products. And here's my question about entrepreneurship. And then it generally happens so that a couple people in the room have some type of interest in what we're doing or maybe have eczema themselves.
And I was a combination because I do have some eczema. I've had it since I was a kid. Mm-hmm. I get it like when I'm a little more stressed or anxious. It's like a warning signal like, Nancy, slow down. I really do think it's like.
It's literally like a red flashing.
It is literally. Yeah. So I heard you ask the question and I saw you as a young entrepreneur and it's like, I want to talk to him. And then ironically, someone else from Maine Biz told you that you should meet me.
Yeah. And I had talked to her at another Maine Biz, actually the Manufacturer Association of Maine event where I was like, hey, I'm doing this thing what do you think? And I just told her the story, Allison, because I think that we have so many cool stories nested in what we're doing, a main story, a story for people with eczema. So I'm trying to figure out, it's so interesting to learn about PR, because we weren't taught about PR in engineering school, how to leverage these types of ways to get your thing out there. And so I'm just shouting lobsters for eczema from the rooftops. That's my strategy.
Well, I think you're doing an awesome job. And also, I think because you're a young Maine entrepreneur, old Maine entrepreneurs like me want to help you. I mean, it's just like, if I could choose someone to mentor, you're the one.
Thank you. Well, that's
so we've got a little bond going on here.
Yeah. Well, it's nice to have that community like that. And I was thinking, after the MTI event we went to, for me, and I won't have to go on a big rant about this, and so stop me, but having people like you here and people having organizations like that here are so incredible. Because I was just saying to someone, I don't know what it was like 15 years ago, because I wasn't here and I wasn't doing things in the world.
And you were
yet.
9 years
I'm
old.
9 years old. I was 9 years old, not trying to start a business, but I imagine that there wasn't a mechanism in the state for someone like me to go to, through highly technical training in university and go to graduate school in engineering and leave completely comfortable with the risk of not getting a job, being able to fund myself, being able to start a business with little to nothing. It's so incredible to have these mechanisms to support new businesses growing, because that's what we really need. You would have had me have to graduate and go down and find a job at one of the larger employers, and there's nothing wrong with that, but there's also nothing ecosystem building about that if you don't have the MTIs and the Libra foundations and the accelerators and things like
and
that.
Score.
Score and so I'll forget to mention all of them, but
right. Well, in the show notes we'll include a link to all of those organizations, because there is really a huge web. I'm glad you brought that up, because when I started my business in 1991, long before you were born, I kind of made it up. Like, I had never even worked for an agency. I had never used an agency. I just had this notion in my mind, agency, that sounds like a really good idea. So I sort of made it up. And there was a lot of tough years of kind of like trying to figure out how to do the pricing piece, and like when to hire my first employee and how many people to hire. So I think that, having business counselors like the ones that have helped you and others here in Maine, and also events like Maine Startup and Create Week.
Oh, yeah.
So other ways that are stimulating entrepreneurialism in Maine. I think it's great.
Yeah. That and I've just been, and you've seen with all the things that I've been trying to do, at least, it's just my friends and I getting together, and I'm starting to notice that there's pockets of young people throughout Maine. There's a good group in Waterville. There's a bunch of people up in Bangor. There's people in Augusta, getting together, getting excited about things, and then having the support financially and from the expertise to be able to do it. And it's incredible.
And also co-working spaces. Today we are here at the Portland Pod, which is in Sopoco in the South Portland co-working space. I know there's many other co-working spaces statewide. So that's another place that people can get together and share ideas and share resources.
I just bounce between the ones in Bangor and Portland. That's where I work.
Yeah,
I can't afford an office.
No.
I can afford a floating desk. Yeah.
So to kick things off, tell me about your career so far and how you got into it in the first place.
Well, I got into the field because I didn't know what I was going to do as a younger person. But I think the cheesy thing that engineers say is I always like to play with Legos. So I like to create my own things, which wasn't really a driving force for me, but really an interest. I think a big driving force for me in high school was in 10th grade when my dad was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And I saw the things that a person goes through when they have that chemo, radiation, and he won that battle. But I saw those things, and the real parts of the world and life became very real to me. So it directed me to say, I want to help people through a career that increases their quality of life. I don't necessarily have to create the next treatment or vaccine or cure for anything, but I saw what it looks like and through a couple other things that I'll tell you about that what it means to actually touch someone and change their lives for the better so they get to have literally a better human experience. And what better driving force can you have in a career? So I gravitated to biomedical engineering. I'm from Connecticut, and I came up to the University of Maine, and they had this great program to help out-of-state people come in and not have to pay ridiculous amounts. So I came up, and I kind of had that in my mind the whole time, the frame of reference and the direction for why I wanted to do things and the type of things I wanted to do, but it wasn't for any specific application. And I left it kind of broad and open for myself. So I kind of explored the university thing. I got involved in a lot of different things and different type of student government things and clubs and research positions. And I just found I found it really enjoyable to play and involve myself in really cool things that felt like play, but they were actually important, and there was a reason that I was doing them. And so I just learned a bunch of things, and I became not particularly very good at anything, but I learned how to speak all these different languages, all these technical languages. From chemistry to biology to math to physics to mechanical engineering, whatever. At least I could do a little bit, and I could talk the talk, and I can communicate with all the different type of people. So as I was graduating, and this whole time, entrepreneurship was a figment of like something that wasn't real. It's just like entrepreneurship. That sounds like something that has never come into my sphere of experience at all. That's someone else's thing. It's not mine. Mine is to become good at a thing and then go out and get a job and do that thing and dedicate myself to that thing. But at the end of my undergraduate career, we did this capstone project, which was the first experience that I got to have a problem, design the thing, and go out to people that it was serving and say, hey, do you like this? Do you think it's cool? Is it actually useful? And it was really cool because the business professors and business people in Bangor came to the student symposium. So we presented at the student symposium, and the business people came and the financial people came, along with the engineers and the people who helped build the thing, and then the people that we could help. So we built a respiratory simulator that basically looked like a young child's torso, and it could breathe in different ways so that nurses can train to identify different respiratory pathologies on a little simulator rather than an actual patient, So they came, and they were like, hey, this is cool. This is useful. The business people were like, hey, this is cool that you built it, but did you ever think about actually bringing it into the world? And we're like, what? That's a new concept. What? We didn't think about that. How do we do that? What is the system in the vehicle by which we can bring something like this into the world? And it is, for majority of the percent of the time, a company and commercializing it. Unfortunately, we don't live in this world where people take things for free and reimburse. Not everything can be just like a project, and you have to construct the system around it to bring it into the world. So we kind of fell into, as our capstone group, we might be able to make a startup company out of this. And a startup company had been not something on my radar either, just because I was very blinders on, focused on my engineering technical skill set that I was building. And then I started to open my mind to the way that the world actually worked, and see that, okay, well, we need to put this whole business thing together with this engineering thing. We need to go back and we need to ask these nurses, like, do you actually like what we built, and how might it look like if it was integrated into your program, and would you be willing to whip your wallet out for it? And it turned out, after going through a couple different programs and learning how to ask customers what they want in a non-biased way, so that we actually get raw, unfiltered answers, that with this particular device, people were not willing to whip out their wallets for it. They just thought it was a cool project. So in this business, without going too deep into the weeds, we took a step back and said, well, what are the problems that we're actually solving? So we started to just go through this process of going in, designing the thing, having a little MVP of a solution, going and presenting it to the people, getting feedback, then taking a step back and trying to listen objectively and think objectively about what we were hearing. And then it brought us through this process of iterating on the problem we were trying to solve and figuring out the real problem and the real pain and designing an actual real solution to that real pain. And that was kind of the beginning of my entrepreneurial experience as I was trying to launch this company, going through all these really interesting and drastic pivots, as well as starting my master's. And that was kind of a hybrid experience where I was learning how to think about, okay, there's this thing, it has potential. How do we bring it into the world? And what is that mechanism that we can bring it into the world? And what does it look like? And how is it going to change? And how are we going to adapt to change as we think about doing that? During that time, I met Dr. Bob Bayer, who was the director of the Lobster Institute at the time. So I was, I kind of trickled accidentally into a master's program, didn't have a set project to work on, and got introduced to him through a neighbor from Goldsboro, Maine. And he said, hey, you should just talk to this guy. He's doing this really cool thing with lobsters and potentially biomedical stuff. And it's actually an interesting initial project that Bob wanted to do. He is a wonderful, almost kind of like a mad scientist, not really, but PhD guy that goes against the grain and does cool stuff for the sake of doing cool stuff and making the world a better place.
Sounds like I need to have him on the PR Maven podcast.
You would love to have Bob on there. He is so animated and so funny. You would love him.
All right.
So he regularly goes and educates people about lobsters, and this is relevant. It's kind of funny. He wanted to help people learn about lobster anatomy, and one of the interesting things that's hard to teach is about the sexuality of the lobster, because it's hard to identify, but it's important to identify, as a lobsterman. So he wanted me to figure out how to scan and 3D print 100 times size lobster genitalia. And that was my initial project, was to, okay, you got this male and you got this female. We need to blow it up and make sure that you can clearly identify
Patrick!
what was, And so how he kind of introduced that to my advisor and I is he had it done initially, low res, but he had it printed. So imagine a lobster, whatever we're going to call it for the sake of filtering language on the podcast. Lobster's about this big.
Larry or Louise lobster.
Yeah, let's say Larry the lobster is a male, and his male part is like this big. He 100 times exploded it with a 3D printer to this big.
Oh, we're going from about 1 inch to about 12 inches.
Yeah. And so he brings in this huge thing. It looks like an antelope horn or some crazy looking huge thing, and gave it to my advisor and I, but didn't tell us what it was. And it was a cool new thing. And my advisor, I was the first graduate student in her lab, and she's a new faculty. So I think she just thought it was a cool thing. So she put it on her desk, not knowing what it was, and would present it to people, really important people that would come in and say, oh, this is just part of a lobster. For months, probably till deans and other faculty and new collaborators. And this was a giant male part sitting on her desk the whole time. And anyway, that was interesting. I thought I would tell you that story. So we quickly.
I'm holding my tongue because there's so many inappropriate.
I'm not allowed to swear or say inappropriate things in your podcast, right? I shouldn't do that.
I think you could, yeah. If you want to.
Okay.
We're not being regulated by the FCC here.
That's good. That's good. So anyway, he wanted to do that. We, for lack of a better terms, banged that project out, and then got to the other thing where he was talking about how he's always been interested in how lobsters have this ability to fight off diseases, heal wounds, and literally I don't know if you know this, but if they get scared and their arms or their limbs get caught in a trap, they can pop them off. If they release enough of the right fear chemicals and hormones and a cascade of other things, they can pop their limb off. Yep. And they can regenerate them. And that's why sometimes if you go to buy a lobster, you'll see one with a huge claw and one with a tiny claw. That other tiny claw, for whatever, maybe it got in a kerfuffle with another lobster or got trapped or whatever, it popped it off and it's starting to regenerate it.
The lobster wills its own leg to come off.
Yeah, well, and that's an interesting word to use because of lobsters' role in the phylogenetic scale. Whether or not it's willingly or not, I actually don't know that. I should figure that one out.
Yeah,
in response to a stimuli, it intentionally pops its limb off. So
you're an expert.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Well, you know more than anybody I've ever talked to about the genitalia of lobsters.
You got to talk to Bob.
Wow. Yeah.
So Bob was always interested in, but if you think about it, in all this new, maybe not Western, but all these different schools of thought when it comes to medicine and healing, there are all these incredible things, from herbs to plants and naturally derived things, or things within your body, even doing breath work and meditation. There are all these incredible things that are coming into the world through the anecdotal and through people making these connections. So why is there this incredibly this organism that evolved in the bottom of the ocean in one of the most harsh environments and developed an elite immune system to deal with that, to fight off all the bad stuff down there and to heal itself and live in an incredibly long lifetime?
Well, they call them bottom feeders, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So why don't we take advantage of that?
Exactly.
So that's,
well, they're not only delicious to eat.
That's right.
But they also have medicinal qualities.
Exactly. I'm trying to point to another organism that comes to mind, and for some reason I'm blanking. But so many plants, like even just CBD coming from different plants, that's coming a mainstream thing now.
Right. And the whole concept of food as medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And to think about what you're putting in your body as being for your health, as opposed to just to fill your stomach up.
Oh yeah, we shouldn't go down that, because I love to experiment with different foods and different diets and stuff to do different things for brain fog and mental clarity and stuff like that. I won't go down there. But
maybe we're gonna have to have you back, because I'm very interested in that.
This is fun. I would love to come back. This is so cool. I just want to sit here and feel like I'm in some seat or in place of importance and just have cool and fun conversations. And all I'm thinking about is
all the hashtags that I'm gonna put out there when I share this on social media. But I do need to go back a few minutes.
Direct it.
Is your father okay?
Well, that's actually been the most driving thing that has that's been the biggest thing that's happened in my life. So my dad has had 5 different battles with cancer now. 1 in high school. 2 of them my parents didn't tell me about when I was going through undergrad. 1 of them right as I was graduating, and actually at the student symposium when I was telling you I was just presenting our first kind of concept for our first business. I had just come back from Yale or UConn or Data Farm or someone like that. And that began this process of me making many trips down to Boston, down to Connecticut, where he was going to get treatment. So he had his 4th diagnosis around the time I was finishing undergrad and beginning grad school. And it was getting worse, and it was something I was grappling with. And he had his 5th diagnosis when I was a year into graduate school. And that's when things really, really took a turn. And I started to think about what in this life is actually important. And with all the things that I'm doing, how am I going to prioritize what's truly, truly important? And, a lot of people, I think, like me, are not good at that. And it takes a traumatic experience and suffering and being on the other side of suffering to realize what is important. So my dad was diagnosed, I forgot what month, but in the general spring timeframe last year. And he, it was not going well. I was taking intermittent time off of grad school. And then in about November, late October, November, I just completely said, you know what? it is time for me to actually completely focus on what's important. So I took time off grad school, and I learned to allow myself to do that and allow myself to give myself the time for what's important. Because when you go down something like that, especially in academia, you get so whittled down in your hole, you kind of don't think about other things. So I spent his last couple months with him in November and December, and he passed away Christmas morning last year.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Well, thank you for saying that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, it's not something that organically comes up in conversation, but it's one of those things that is, for me, I already had an open mind, and I thought I knew things, but that type of thing just completely shatters your perception for anything and everything, like everything, the way you think about the world, what your figment and your perception for the world is, which is just a bunch of stories that you tell yourself and the way you experience things and interpret those things. And then it all kind of broke, and it was a really transformative process for me, because
he was obviously the greatest dad ever, because dad. Look at you. I mean,
he was
he
an
raised
incredible
you.
Dad. He showed me how to be super strong. He had cancer each time in his throat, and it was kind of, I won't go into in gory details, but it was basically wrapping around different nerve bundles. So it was like being stabbed constantly in one of the most sensitive areas of your body, your tongue. And so he just showed me a lot of things. And one of the things, when I mentioned play earlier, he showed me how to enjoy things, during the storm, and find a way to, is one of the quotes I actually think about sometimes, is dance in the rain. And it sounds cheesy, but if you kind of know what it means and it means something to you, it's really powerful. So we were at an oncologist meeting. Oh gosh, I'm trying to think about exactly what his quote was. We were at it. He was doing really bad. He was sick. He had a fever. We were at a meeting with an oncologist, and the oncologist stepped out of the room, and my mom goes, "Hey, Warren, you're really hot. Are you okay?" And he just goes, "Huh. Thanks, babe." This guy was in the worst pain you could possibly be in. He's making jokes. He's trying to make the best out of it, trying to laugh. And I was just like, damn,
God bless him.
That is awesome. That is the type of person I want to be. I want to have that strength. I want to have that outlook for life. I want to be able to make the best of things. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, my dad passed away, but he kind of lives on in the way that I am able to change people's lives and change the world and make it a better place. So the one story that I'll share that is important, because and I want to communicate to you and people who listen, because I've been going around and telling people the motivation for our companies, and specifically the company where we're making products for people with eczema, is quality of life. And it's this kind of pie in the sky term that I don't think a lot of people understand, but I happen to understand it because I saw what quality of life was, because I was able to be one of those people in my dad's corner of the ring, fighting for him, going to war with the oncologists, being there all the time, seeing what was working, what wasn't, changing all the things so he could experience a better human experience. One of those things that was kind of crazy, that allows, like, I keep drawing on this for multiple ways and allows me to open my mind to things, is when he was diagnosed when I was in 10th grade, it was in his throat. So he was hit with radiation, and it hit it really hard. And he wasn't able, his salivary glands basically stopped producing saliva. So for 7 years, he went around with a water bottle in his pocket because he needed moisture in his mouth to eat real food. And so he basically had to have like a liquid diet. And when I started doing this research in this work with Bob and Lobster Unlimited and the company, using this protein from lobsters for all these crazy things, and seeing the data in the lab start to look positive, and seeing the anecdotal things come through. My dad was in his third battle at the time, and I said, "Dad, I don't know, but I've seen some crazy things happen, and I really believe that anything is possible. And you're in pain, you're struggling, and we got this thing going on in the same place. Would you consider just gargling with this, or trying to drink it, or putting it in your throat or something?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, totally." Because when you get to a certain point, as you know, with eczema, you're willing to basically try anything. And so he started to gargle with this, and it didn't help his cancer, but in 2 months his salivary production came back. And he, like, can you imagine the change of quality of life after 7 years of not producing saliva and getting used to it? And this is now my life without saliva. This is now my life where I have to, the process for eating food is different. The process for speaking is different. All these different things that you don't think about. And he was able to say, thank you. You actually changed the quality of my life. I can now have a better human experience and do things that I could not do before, and I didn't even know it was possible. And so I'm able to look back and say, who in the world would have thought that this weird stuff from lobsters could be useful for all these applications? And it's just being the person that has an open mind to think that, it could be possible. Because who else would have been the link between this potential solution and this dire problem for which everyone else that was supposed to show up and help accepted it as the reality? And then there was this person that came, which was whoever introduced my dad to this thing, which is myself and Bob and all these people in the circle of trying to make this happen, was the link between the solution that was way out there in this problem. And I'm able to look back at it and be like, wow, that's what a change of quality of life looks like. And anything is possible. Literally anything is possible.
Well, I love that story. It's a beautiful story. And the other thing that I love that you said a while back was you have a personal mission statement in your life that guides you in your life. And how many other, well, I've never met a 24-year-old who had a clearly articulated mission statement. And, I'm really into personal branding, and that's kind of the foundation of a person's personal brand. And you have that figured out. So,
yeah.
And the other thing I want to say is hats off to the University of Maine for having that program that attracted you here from Connecticut and then has kept you, because we talk so much in the state of Maine about the brain drain and keeping young people here. But this is an example of a program that drew you here. And hopefully through this whole web of resources, we are, as a state, are going to keep you here and learning more about lobsters and not only learning and discovering, but also the commercialization.
Yeah.
So it's so very exciting.
Yeah, I can't speak more to the people that actually can't speak more of the people that take the time to actually sit down with people like me and tell me their stories and share things and offer their time. Because, there are people like that all over the world, but it's important to keep people here. You need these mentors, and you also need to highlight success stories to make people understand that it's possible. So it's so cool when I go and, I'm not some acclaimed speaker or anything like that, but even going to just K through 12 schools and giving like 30-minute talks and telling them, oh, yeah, I worked on this project where we were using crazy chemical catalysis to clear waters. Then I worked on this project where this lab was using pulp from the paper industry to make artificial bones. Then I worked on this project where we use lobsters to treat all these diseases. And they're just like, what? I thought that only happened in Boston. It's like, nope.
Right.
Nope. It's actually right next door.
It's great. Now, another thing I need to ask you about, because, I don't know if you knew, I also am from Connecticut originally.
I didn't know that.
Yes. And I came here at age 17 with my family. And, there's this joke in Maine, like, that you're from away. And, if you weren't born here, then you'll never really be a Mainer. And it's kind of like, ha, ha, ha. It's funny, but there's sort of an undercurrent, like not really, like you're not really a Mainer unless you were born here. Yeah. Has that impacted you? Because I'm thinking of doing some research on whether this scares people away or not.
I think it depends on where you are, because, certainly in Southern Portland, where there's a very bubbly, welcoming ecosystem, no one's going to say, get out of here, you nutmegger, which, I wouldn't blame them for saying that. I'm trying.
Connecticut is the nutmeg state.
It is. I used to call people Connecticutians, but that just sounds dumb. And I think the actual term is a nutmegger. Not that I ever used that term, but
I've never heard it.
No. Well, I don't know. I just made it up. But I think maybe in different communities, you might have that happen. Like when my family kind of followed me up here in the third year of my undergrad, and they got a house in Goldsboro, which is like kind of like the smaller town Maine type vibe with a lot of lobstermen there. I think we probably got a little bit of that, especially showing up and bringing our cars up and our boats up, and then being like, oh yeah, nice.
Flatlanders.
Yeah. But then we made friends with all our neighbors and stuff. But for me, it hasn't been a thing at all. It hasn't been a thing at all, because I've just completely embraced the Maine lifestyle, which is just a lot of being able to balance life and all the cool things you want to go do outside and do with all the cool work that you can do too, rather than like truly in Connecticut. It was like growing up in several different Desperate Housewives seasons. And it's just like everyone's got their lawn mown perfectly, everyone's got green grass, and it's not like all like that, but there's the general vibe of people is so much different, less judgmental, less egotistical, more just interested in genuinely enjoying life and having good, authentic human interactions, in Maine. And I really like that, and that's why I stayed here. But I can't say there's any point in which I did not feel welcome, but I do know of some instances where we've had friends, for example, we've had friends in different towns that came out in high school, and that was really frowned upon by the community, which there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but things like that I think are less accepted. If you think about the people, the group of Mainers that might treat people from away like that, it's like those type of people. So I certainly know that's a thing, and I've heard things like that, but it's never happened to me.
Well, I'm glad, because I think Maine should be trying to do everything in its power to keep you here.
Yeah. With general inclusivity.
That's right.
Should be a thing.
That's right. Well, I think we need to go to break, as much as I hate to, but I want to share some exciting news with PR Maven Nation about the podcast. And that is that we have a PR Maven Nation listener line now. So our listeners can call in to 207-620-9075 and ask me anything, or share feedback or ideas for the podcast, or other great guests like this Dr. Bob, who I want to have on to talk about lobster genitalia and other lobster facts. But right now we're going to take a quick break and be back with more in just a moment. So I'm so excited. We have our first question on the PR Maven Nation listener line, and it's from Maureen Duggan, who is a longtime friend. She was at the first anniversary PR Maven Nation party, and her question is this.
Hi, Nancy. I just wanted to let you know that I had a fabulous time at your first anniversary party for the podcast. I even brought my mom to meet Lieutenant Tim Cotton. She's from Bangor and was absolutely starstruck. And I did have a question for you about podcasts. How do you go about building an audience for your podcast? I would worry that if I started a podcast, no one would listen. Appreciate any advice you could give. Thanks, Nancy.
So, Maureen, you're worried about starting a podcast, but then like having a party and nobody comes to the party, but nobody listens to your podcast. And it really depends on what your vision is for your podcast. When I started the PR Maven podcast, I wanted it to be something to incorporate into the marketing of my business, Marshall Communications, but also the PR Maven part of my business, which does focus on personal branding. We had a pretty intentional plan for the PR Maven podcast, but I think of it in building out in concentric circles. So if you start your podcast, first you want to make sure that you notify all of your friends and family. And so if you make a map and you put yourself in the center, and then the first concentric circle might be all your relatives. And then the second concentric circle going out might be all of your friends. And think of all your friends from the past as well. Like who did you go to school with? Who did you play on sports teams with? Who are you in clubs with? And then all the people that you know now, both personally and professionally. What organizations are you part of now? For example, if you go to the University of Maine, like our guest Patrick does, think of all the other students, the faculty, the alumni, and everyone affiliated with the university. Then the next concentric circle out would be all the people that your people know. So try to ask your people, your friends, family, and network to share news about your podcast with their people. So it's like when you're doing advertising on Facebook and you ask Facebook to deliver a lookalike audience. You want to get more people that are like your people. And so keep asking people to share your podcast with others and sort of do it like a public service. Then if you want to get beyond those layers, you may want to start, well, obviously you're going to be doing social media, but you may want to start paying for social media, and Facebook advertising or LinkedIn advertising might be a good route. Again, Facebook, if it's a little more of a personal kind of podcast, LinkedIn, if it's more professional. The other thing that I would recommend that you do is speaking engagements and go out and speak to organizations. And when you do speak, ask those organizations to include it in their social media and their newsletters and also press releases to the media. And then the other thing is to do PR for yourself. So I have had write-ups about the PR Maven podcast in Maine Biz and in the Portland Press Herald. And we also are communicating now with many of the PR industry publications. I'm also part of an organization called the League of Maine Podcasters, which started out of the Portland Pod where we do record this podcast. And so we share with all of the other podcasters in Maine, as well as Maine Public Radio has a list of podcasts, which this podcast is on. So it takes some creative thinking, it takes some elbow grease, but creating a network map is something that I recommend so that you can think of all of the networks that you're part of and make sure you share the news with those networks. I hope that helps, Maureen, and good luck in starting your podcast. Welcome back. And today we're talking with Patrick Breeding, who is project manager at Lobster Unlimited. And I want to dive right back in with more questions. Patrick, you've been part of starting several companies. Can you tell me about those companies?
Yeah. So, as I had mentioned earlier, in grad school, I had worked with Lobster Unlimited just in a research capacity. So we were looking at anti-cancer applications of this protein that we're using. And during the time I was working with them, I opened my eyes to the actual potential that is going down the drain, because it's a lobster processing waste byproduct, and not understanding why no one's taking advantage of them. Then coupling that to all of the different anecdotal testimonials and stories we've seen, for me, our eczema skincare line being driven by Amber, my partner, who had horrible eczema ever since we've been dating. We've been almost together for 6 years now. And I saw in just about a week, the use of these products completely change her, again, quality of life. So coupling that, all these different life-changing things that happened for me, I saw my partner's life change, and I was learning more about the way that the world works in the sense of you need to figure out how to bring this to people, and this would be in the form of a company. That this makes sense. This is something that we need to do and we feel compelled to do, and it's almost like you're doing the world an injustice by not bringing this thing to them. So I started to realize as a graduate student, like, hey, we got to do this thing. we got to actually do this and take advantage of what's not being taken advantage of. So we started to kind of come together and work just basically as not co-founders, but just business partners, and we started to build out, okay, so we have this really cool active ingredient that has all these different applications. How are we going to apply, a rational and strategic mindset to bring this into the world? So rather than go for all pathologies at once, maybe let's focus on one and target it and gain a foothold in there, and then grow our awareness in this application, which we found to be eczema, and then go into the other ones. So we began to develop a plan for how we could bring this into the world, and through skincare products topically makes the most sense, because if you've taken away anything from my previous story in the first half, I saw a lot of the really cool things that have had a big impact in my life come from the anecdotal and just trying things. So why I say that is because we had this choice to make of, do we want to go through the typical drug discovery pharma route, or do we want to try to bring this into the world through a different vehicle, through more of a skincare company, and which is really regulated like cosmetics, which is a very strange fringe area, but it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And when you look at people that have eczema, they're using mostly topical skincare products that they're getting through whether or not their friend recommended it to them or they're finding it online. A small majority of people are using, injectable drugs. And I'm not saying those are bad. I'm just saying that there's a way that we can bring this into the world on a sooner timeline, ethically, and doing all the right things so that we can begin to change people's lives quick, in the quickest and most ethical manner possible. So we built out this plan to build a skincare company, and then realized, okay, if we're going to build a skincare company and we're going to really reach people with eczema on a large scale and realize the true potential in our vision for this company, we're going to have to compete with people like Jessica Alba and the Honest Company, where she'll go to influencers and say, hey, for every single post on Instagram you post with our product in it, I'll give you $1,500. It's like, oh my gosh, we're competing on that scale. And it's not a fear thing. It's very exciting, but that comes with, okay, so what does the company need to look like to be able to compete at this level? And what way do we want to go there? Do we want to try to go to these companies, the L'Oreals and the J&Js and the P&Gs, and say, hey, we got this cool ingredient. Do you want to white label our products, or do you want to license our ingredient, or go and build the company ourselves? And I think our vision for it is we want to build the company because we're coming from such an authentic place, knowing that this has changed our lives in multiple ways. Specifically with Amber and her eczema, and now many family and friends, we know what people want to hear. We know their problems that they suffer from because we experience those, and we know the messaging points we want to kind of turn those problems into, and we know, what works in products and what doesn't. And we don't know all those things, but we're learning more and more on how to better do all these things. So building the company out ourselves makes the most sense. So now we're spinning out companies, and this is the first company from Lobster Unlimited that we're spinning out as its own entity, where we're anticipating that we're going to have to go out and raise quite a bit of capital to get production off the ground, to get a big marketing and social media strategy budget, and bring in people that are much more experienced than we are. So now we're in this process with our skincare company and developing the vision and the long-term strategy, and trying to figure out what do we have to do, what milestones do we have to set to make sure we're playing in that right field that we want to be playing in. So that's that we're calling that dermaris. So derm is skin, and then aris is the suffix from Homarus americanus, which is the American lobster. And I'll admit that this is kind of like my engineering mind, like, haha, this is a sneaky name. I don't know if people will like it. I don't know.
Damaris. I like it. Well, of course, I have a cottage on Damascotta Lake.
Maybe there's a little cool Maine thing in there.
Right.
Yeah. And so whatever it's going to be called, we're thinking about how do we launch this, and we think that through some type of crowdfunding, maybe Kickstarter, it will be a lucrative ability for us to do our own initial PR and marketing, because we can tell those cool stories. Like I had mentioned, we can tell a really cool Maine story where there's very much potential to be more value from the lobster industry that is going down the drain than is actually currently used as meat. So that's an incredible story for the potential of Maine's largest sustainable fishery and the economic impact of utilizing that waste. And then there's this incredible story for people suffering from eczema, trying to go through products and all these steroids and not being able to trust and not feeling comfortable around their own skin. And we know those stories because Amber lived through those. So we think that through crowdfunding, we'll be able to get enough funds up front so that we can do an initial production run. And then right now we're participating in Scratchpad Accelerator up in Bangor, which is really helping us think, okay, well, we're going to launch. What comes next?
Yeah.
Which we have, we're learning now.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Scratchpad, because I know you've been doing a lot of networking events, and that's how you're broadening your network for yourself and the company. Can you mention some of the other networking events you've been attending?
Yeah. So it's funny to say, in my earlier days,
yeah, right.
like 2 years ago when I was just starting out and learning in a big growth phase of entrepreneurial skills, I was going to programs up in Bangor, like Big Gig, like things held at the Foster Center for student innovation, different things through the business schools, different things through Fusion Bangor up there, and Focus Maine. And then as I've been going out and now trying to make our presence known more in Maine, MTI events, Maine Biz, Startup Maine was an incredible week that we were able to attend, or many days. And so I'm not probably doing a good due diligence on all the events I've been able to attend, but just so many workshops and so many little networking events that it's always so exciting to make the drive down from Orono, because I know that there are all these people here that are just showing up because they're genuinely excited to support entrepreneurship, and they're welcoming. So they're not going to, I can go up and ask a very genuinely, very stupid question, very stupid, bad question, very open-ended, but people will still be like, oh, it's okay. This is the type of people we need to nurture in this state. And
and your questions are not at all bad.
Yeah, it used to be. I used to raise my hand and be like, can you please tell me how to be successful? Like stupid questions, but yeah.
I love that.
They're getting more specific now. But.
So what is the best way for members of PR Maven Nation to get in touch with you?
Well, LinkedIn would be convenient. I managed to get the handle LinkedIn / and my full name is William Patrick Breeding. I didn't know if you know that, and I go by my middle name. That's what my parents decided to go by. Anyway, so my LinkedIn is LinkedIn / WPB, which is cool. So I got that.
Yeah.
And my email right now is a little complex, but it's p.b.lobsterunlimited@gmail.com. So I need to get a new email handle with the website and the handle there. I know.
I must say that's a little signal that you're not totally there yet. I feel like we need to. Part of this.
Yeah,
too.
Maybe if I could get a free couple sessions of the Marshall Plan.
We'll have to talk about that.
So LinkedIn would be good. Email would be good. I'm not very active on social media, and it's always been something I've kind of pulled myself away from because it was kind of like a distraction. So I'm not that active. So I would say those are the best two channels to get in touch with me.
Well, I hate to end this conversation, but I think in the interest of time, we need to. But I definitely think we need to have a second episode with you, because I just feel like you are such an inspiration to other entrepreneurs and students who have ideas about companies. And I also think that it's very affirming for the web of people in Maine, professionals who are trying to help companies like you. So I'm hoping that they're all going to listen to this podcast and want to help you more.
Yeah, we're so for our skincare company, we're happy to send samples out. We want to talk to people with eczema.
Yeah,
because we're in the process of building the brand now. We want to build the right brand and the right products to click with the right pain points. So
I love that.
Yeah, hopefully people do hear this in any capacity. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Patrick.
Thank you for having me.
Fun.
This has been so much fun. I'm so sorry I ranted so much.
No, you were awesome.
Yeah. Awesome.
So have a great day, PR Maven Nation. That's it for this week's episode. I'd like to thank you for listening, and if you feel that you've gotten value out of today's conversation, consider leaving a 5-star review on iTunes or whatever app you're using to tune in. If you haven't subscribed yet, you should do so. I release a new episode each week, and subscribing will make sure you get an alert when there's a new episode. You can also join the PR Maven Nation by going to prmaven.com/nation and clicking join. It's free, and it's a great community of like-minded individuals who are all looking to learn and grow from one another. If you have an Alexa-enabled device, be sure to add the PR Maven Marketing Minute to your daily flash briefing menu. Thanks again for listening, and have a great rest of your week, PR Maven Nation.